All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Morning. Thanks for joining us on this Monday, January morning. Just checking that you can see the slides and that you can also hear my voice loud and clear. We'll start back in 5 more minutes. Can you just say you can hear me and see the slides? Thank you.
Morning everyone, just testing because we've got some feedback that people can't hear us. Can you hear me now? If you can just write in the chat field or the question box, whichever, just to give some feedback as to whether you can now hear us loud and clear. Wonderful, I've just got my first yes, which means I must be working, so I'm just going to pop you back on hold and then we'll go live for 11 o'clock. Thanks very much for all the feedback.
Good morning and welcome to our webinar for the Level 2 Hair Professional Standard. And we thank you for joining us on this what's chilly Monday morning. So what we'll be looking for is, are you ready for EPA? And that's presented by myself, Sarah Fioda, Hair and Beauty Technical Advisor, and
Charlotte Freeman, and I'm the Endpoint Assessment Partnership Team Manager.
Okay, moving on. So what are we going to be looking at today? So before we start the presentation, I'd like to explain a few things about our webinar platform to allow you to get the most out of your experience. So you're all in listen-only mode, and that's so we don't get any feedback. However, to engage with the webinar, please use the on-screen panel to type any questions, and we will answer these questions at the end of the presentation. After the webinar, we'll provide you with a copy of the slide, the recording, plus any FAQs that have come out of this webinar today. So the webinar is aimed at any centre, new centres, employers registered or will be registering and booking for endpoint assessment for the Level 2 Hair Professional Standard. It may also be of interest to all walled garden administrators who oversee the EPA registration and booking processes for their centre. But the main aim of this is for us to help you or to provide you with support when delivering the hair professional for the ON programme and the endpoint of assessment. We are going to be asking you some questions. So how's it going? So if you can write in your question box or chat how it's going, let us know. Let us know what's going well. These are things we want to discuss with you. What's not going so well? Just let's talk about it. So feel free to put any questions into the box. And now I'm going to hand over to Charlie. Hi, Charlie.
Morning, everyone. So it's a Monday morning, so that's always a good test that we've all managed to log in and get onto the call today. And this is also going to be recorded for anybody else, so welcome anybody else that's listening to us at any other date or time after the event. What I want to do today is just give you some highlights to try and help you with the EPA booking process. So Sarah is going to be the hair expert today, who will give you all the hints and tips about the hair and getting ready for the hair EPA event. But today I'm just going to give you just a couple of highlights in order to engage with our systems to get you booked and get that EPA date. So in front of you, and the link will be shared with you in the slides, is the key 8 stages really. But once you're set up to be a centre, you kind of go through stages 1 and 2 to do that. You get to stage 3, which is registering your apprentice with ourselves. This is an interactive guide when you go onto the link, so you can click onto stage 3 and it'll tell you everything that you need to know about making a registration, but I'm going to cover some key highlights on the next slide. The next really important stage after stage 3 is stage 5, which is all about making your booking for EPA. So again, this is what I'm going to cover in the first 5 minutes of this presentation, is your key highlights about how to make a successful registration with ourselves in the walled garden system, and then how to make a successful booking and the different steps that you would need to go through, and how to plan and in terms of getting ready for that required EPA day, the sort of timescales behind that you need to do in your countdown with your apprentices to make sure everybody's ready to try and get the best date for your apprentices that you require for you and your salons as well. So I thought it was really important just to tell you through a couple of the critical platforms that you'll engage with if you haven't already done EPA with us, and I think I can see a few names on the screen who have, but those that haven't done EPA with us, you would make 2 interactions with our walled garden system. That would be your registration at the very start of the programme, and then an EPA booking, which typically would happen about 30 days before your required EPA event. You can do it a bit sooner if you're lovely and organised, but 30 days is your critical and your minimum timescale that you need to give us in that system to make your booking in order to get through all the different stages and get your EPA date booked and confirmed. So what you would do as a centre is you would go onto Walled Garden and you would make your registration. Then you'd go away and as the experts that you are, you would deliver all of your wonderful on programme, and then 30 days before you want your EPA event, you would come back into Walled Garden and you would then make your final EPA booking. Now this is the critical bit, and I'll go on the next slide of some of the information that we do need to have in that system in Walled Garden to make those 2 different entries in Walled Garden. Once you've made the booking, however, we would then validate all the information that you've given us in that system, and we're just basically checking that we've got all the information that we need in order to create and book an EPA event for yourself and your apprentice, and to also make sure that we've got all the valid information to send and make their final certificate claim with the ESFA. Once we've validated that, we set you up in the EPA portal, which is the second system that you'll interact with. And the EPA portal is where you would start to upload any of the mandatory gateway evidence. So after your booking, we're only asking for your mandatory gateway evidence at this stage, which would be the fact that you've achieved or conferred the units, the on-programme units, and that you have done your maths and English. Bear with me 2 seconds, I've just popped up that somebody can't hear me on the system. So Alison, I can see that you're asking that you can't hear anything. I've got others who have told me that they can hear, so I don't know whether that's your system and your volumes, but I'm just going to progress on. But don't worry, we will send the recording out as well. So once you've got access to the EPA portal, this is where you would upload those mandatory evidence. So your maths, your English, obviously for a level 2, that would be an attempt or an achievement of your level 2 maths and English, and also the conferred outcome that you've claimed for the unit on programme achievement. Again, there's just some really strong hints and tips about this that I'll go on the next slides just to show you what that evidence looks like in terms of any screen print evidence that you can upload instead of waiting for an actual physical certificate. So we do accept that too. After you've uploaded all of your evidence, we then validate all of your EPA mandatory evidence. So we're checking that the maths and the English certificate is correct. And we're also checking your units have been claimed for and they're showing at the conferred status. Once that's all been done, you'll then be allocated over to our EPA booking team, who will look at the proposed EPA date that you select in the booking screens at the start when you make your booking, and they'll be trying to match you up to a next best available IEPA. They'll be in touch with you as a centre with the centre coordinators that you've told us in that EPA booking screen in Walled Garden, and they'll email you to come over an email confirmation once they've got an available IEPA matched to your proposed date. Now, we do aim to fulfil that proposed date, but there can be instances where we may not be able to fill that date. In those instances, we will always be in touch with you to coordinate for an alternative best date that suits your apprentice and you around your working salon. So, as I mentioned, these are just the critical pieces of information that we would need at those two critical points in Walled Garden. So your registration on your left-hand side there shows you all the sort of mandatory information that you'd need to have present before making your registration. So if you've got all that nice and handy so that it can be inputted into the system. The second stage, like I said before, is 30 days as a minimum before your EPA event. You will go back into Walled Garden and make your booking. And at your booking request, you can see that middle column, which tells you the booking information that we would need. And then there is a mandatory 2 additional screens that you need to go into, which is the employer information and the EPA event information. So you make your booking and then you go and find your booking again, and you have to then fill in the additional 2 tabs showing the employer information and the EPA event information. And again, you'll get a copy of these slides that you can refer back to make sure that you've got all the mandatory data at hand before you go ahead and make a booking. Just to talk you through some timescales, and there's a link on this slide at the bottom as well, which takes you through a PDF help guide, and it talks you through all of those different stages on the different screens for making a registration and also the EPA booking as well. So if you've not done it and this is your first time, that's a really useful document to be referring to because it talks you through all the different screens and how to enter all the different information that we require in those booking stages. So, for example, it's a minimum of the 30 days. If you went into the system today to make an EPA booking, your first available date will be towards the end of February now. Our biggest top tip to you is it will automatically populate with the first available date. So that date will be sometime in mid-February onwards. This might not necessarily be the date that you need EPA on. So please do click into that box and make the date. You can move it forwards to any other future dates, such as if you was making an advance booking, maybe 40 days in advance, but you know that you don't need the EPA until March, but you're making that booking today, then you can change that populated date to the actual date that you require the EPA for your apprentice. And that's really important because don't just leave it to the automated populated date, because this is the date that the EPA coordination team will start to try and liaise with IEPAs for. So you need to make sure that that date that's inputted is right for you and your apprentice. Also, just to know, when you put that preferred date into the booking system, that is just a proposed date at this stage. It's only once it's validated and you're through each of the different stages and our EPA coordinator starts to work on it, they will then coordinate with an IEPA, and at that stage, an EPA booking form would be sent to you in the email. Once you've received this, you must sign it and return it back to ourselves. And only then is that date 100% held and you know that that EPA event is happening on the date that you've confirmed. Just to recap on gateway evidence, all of you should be aware that in order for a level 2 standard, you need to be achieved at a level 1 maths and English, and you must have at least attempted, if not achieved, which is obviously the better outcome that I'm sure we're all aiming for, the maths and English at level 2. Just a little bit of myth busting there, because we get asked this quite often, is what evidence does demonstrate an attempt. So it's an attempt of all components. So within English level 2, you've got your speaking, your listening, and your reading and writing. So it's an attempt at all those different aspects, and you need to show that they've obviously demonstrated and achieved those or attempted those. So you might have passed one of those elements but failed another one. Obviously that is then showing your attempt at that stage for your evidence. For the on programme, as I mentioned before, it is the units. Obviously there isn't a full qualification achievement, because many will be aware on this call that the EPA is the final unit of the actual diploma qualification. So you don't get your full diploma certificate, so that's not what we're expecting. It is just the unit achievement as your evidence that we'll be looking for. So it'd be the statement that you've achieved the mandatory on-programme units, and then obviously EPA would complete being the final unit, and at the end of EPA or a successful achievement of EPA, that would release your EPA certificate and also your hair diploma certificate as well. Just because I mentioned before that you can do a screen print, so you can go to Walled Garden and you can take a screen print of your evidence, as long as if you look at the final line on that screen there that's available for you, it shows that all those units are conferred. It must have that final line on, so it must say a conferred status if you're using the screen print evidence. If, for instance, it just says pass all along against the units and you don't have that conferred status, then that will prevent you from moving on to getting an EPA date until that evidence is uploaded. You will stay at a gateway not met status. So it's really critically important that that conferred status is showing against your units before you upload it at gateway. Just want to talk about some top tips as well. So my biggest top tip is register earlier. The sooner you make that initial registration in Walled Garden, the sooner we know that you have an EPA apprentice with ourselves. And that's how we do our capacity planning and how we recruit for our IEPAs. So we're always working 12 to 18 months looking ahead at what we need to do to be able to make sure we're meeting your demand. So that's really important for capacity. Make sure you've got the right EPA date, so that you've got a confirmed EPA date, so that when you're making the booking, you're changing that date to the date that you want. In terms of the Gateway Declaration form, you can get these on our website and download them for the hair, and they do need to be signed for the hair standard. And at this stage, the apprentice needs to sign it. You also need to get your employer to sign it, and you guys as the provider needs to sign that as well. So that's 4 signatures that need to go on that declaration form before you either scan it and upload it back into the system. Also, obviously, for your standard, we do group bookings. So it's not just a one-on-one assessment. We can assess up to 8 apprentices. So if you do want to do group bookings, just get your apprentices on together, and then we can put them through for the same preferred date and get them booked into an IEPA. And obviously for yourselves, there's a price advantage of doing those group bookings. The more apprentices you have, the cheaper the EPA price is per head. So I think that summarises everything from me in terms of top tips. The other thing that I just wanted to highlight to you is our Get to Gateway service. This is a system that's been built specifically for preparing apprentices for Gateway. For standards, and we have the product on there for hair as well. So it gives you some brilliant resources to support the on-programme delivery. So please do, there's a link in the website and there's some useful information on here that we'll share with you in the follow-up. But if you do want to hear anything more about the product that we've developed, which is called Get to Gateway for your hair standards and to support your on-programme delivery, then please do get in touch. Other than that, because we're critical for time on the webinar today, I'm going to hand you over to Sarah, who is going to just give you some useful information about the hair. I'm just going to flick through a couple of screens about key contact details. So we've got the customer success team. They're on hand to support you for your EPA journey, and they can give you any tips when you come into making that EPA booking or any questions about your evidence gateway. And then there's my team. So there's Martin Newman for the South. There's Rebecca, who works in the Midlands, and Janice in the North, who can link up to give any of that expertise of EPA knowledge and sharing that with you and the process and other experiences from other customers. So those numbers are on the screen for you to get in contact with. So enough about me now on the process and everything else like that. And I'm going to hand you over to Sarah.
Hi guys, she's a wealth of knowledge, isn't she, Charlie? Wow, thanks Charlie for that. You've got my head going now. So this slide, I just want to start off with this slide because I would like you to go onto the IFATE website and actually download the occupational standard, because it gives you an overview of the mandatory core skills, knowledge and behaviours for hairdressing and barbering. Also, on this, you'll see on the screen, there's a link to the website. You'll also be able to get the next version of the assessment plan. That's version 2. That was published on the 10th of September 2019. Now, the assessment plan is a really an excellent tool for you to look at straight away prior to even the on-programme, you see, to see what the standard is all about. The assessment plan has an appendix, and that will help you to support the apprentice prior to their endpoint assessment, as the endpoint assessor will only check against the appendix A or B, depending on the route of that apprenticeship. So familiarise yourself with the core skills knowledge, also the professionalism, behaviours, values, communication, safe working practice, consultation. So we know that the hairdressing professional assessment plan has 2 routes. So A is for hairdressing and B is for barbering. I would suggest that your apprentices cross-reference the clients that they're going to use for their endpoint assessment to the assessment plan, either to Appendix A or Appendix B, to make sure they cover the range on the day of their endpoint assessment. So please take time to download all the support material available, as this will help you to support the apprentice prior to their EPA journey. Now this slide is all about planning your 24-month journey, and you can see we have stage 1, which you all are very familiar with, which is the on-programme, and we have a qualification attached to this on-programme stage 1. So we have the handbook, the logbook, assessors guides, FAQs, LEPA reports, EPA preparation tool on smart screen. I mean, as you've just heard from Charlie, we have the Get to Gateway. But again, they're all great, but you still need the occupational standard and the assessment plan from the IFATE website. And I would suggest when you're working on programme with your learner, you're working with that assessment plan too, because ultimately the final module of this unit is their endpoint, this qualification is their endpoint assessment. So stage 2. Well, we all know that they must achieve the on-programme part of the hair or barbering, all their assessments, and make sure they've covered all their range. The apprentice must have achieved a level 1 in English and Maths, as Charlie said, and attempted level 2. They must have completed all elements and components of their on-programme qualification. The employer, with the training provider and the apprentice, need to consider, does that apprentice demonstrate the knowledge, skills and behaviours set out by the standard? So are they ready for endpoint assessment? That is prior to going through to stage 3 on Gateway. So this is the area where I would be doing on my stage 2, would be mock assessments, mock endpoint assessment, trade tests, using the schedule and appointment column, and also allowing the learner to then practice their 2 models. So once you're confident, and as Charlie said, everybody signed the declaration form, we're going to go into stage 3. So this is the endpoint assessment of the skills, knowledge and behaviours set out by this standard. So we have our oral questions and practical observation. So this practical observation is a trade test. It's a summative trade test, and it's assessed by the endpoint assessor. That's why we said it would be good to get your learners assessed by somebody else in maybe an area that they've never worked before, just to give them a feeling of what it's going to be like when they go on the day. So once the apprentice has achieved their EPA, the IFATE will issue the overarching certificate to the employer. Right, so now we're going to look at grading this endpoint assessment or trade test, or if you want to call it shop floor ready. But we're working through a grading criteria here. So the apprentice will be graded on ways of working, the technical skills, which is the core content, their understanding, and their customer service. So this is only a pass or distinction qualification, that we don't really want to talk about the fails, but the final grade for the endpoint assessment is based on a holistic judgment made by the endpoint assessor. This is made on across the apprentice's performance on both practical and oral questions in line with the grade profiles. So if your apprentice gets a pass, that means they've achieved 70% or higher. If they achieve a distinction, that means they've achieved 90% or higher. So these are really super high-ended grades. So a pass candidate, what does a pass candidate look like? Well, they're able to manage a column, which is expected. They're expected to work within the service times, work safely, hygienically, be professional, complete a range of techniques, methods, tools, and use lots of products and different equipment, achieve different looks, use products and services, gave sound advice and guidance, made sure the client was comfortable throughout the services, and able to respond to any questions they may have accurately. Now, a distinction candidate, in addition to meeting all the pass criteria, are really confident, organised, proactive in their approach to work, continually managing their time effectively, demonstrating constant attention to detail in all aspects of the work. They're capable of combining and adapting a full range of techniques and constantly taking into consideration the factors, the immediate factors and the long-term factors that go beyond the basic service. And this is backed up with evidence of a full understanding of the influencing service and the outcomes appropriately. Again, looking at client comfort, that is considered, continually going the extra mile to meet the customer needs, so that the service experience is as good as possible, and constantly able to respond to any questions asked with full justification for any decisions made or advice given, further evidencing their full depth of understanding. So if we look at ways of working, I think ways of working, if they pass, it's 25 marks. If they get a distinction, it's 35 marks. We're not going to go through the technical skills, but the understanding, if they pass, that's 100 marks. If they get a distinction, that's 140 marks. And the customer service is 25 for a pass and 35 for a distinction. So there is some really good work you could work around yourself with your apprentice on helping you to grade them and them to grade themselves. This slide is just reference to the actual standard and the endpoint assessment of what the apprentice must do on the day, and the services and specific requirements that must be carried out. But we know we've got to create a restyle and finish using a minimum of 3 cutting techniques, changing the shape and the length. The creative style should be finished to complete the style. This includes a blow dry using a round brush. So they can do 1 of 2 styles in the finished look. They have to have 2 finished looks, a minimum of using a minimum of 4 techniques. So that's a blow dry, hair up. Please remember that one model has to have above the hair, above the shoulder length hair, and one has to have below the shoulder length hair. So they'll do a setting technique. That could be using the pin curls. It could be using the brush when you're blow drying the hair into a curl, securing it with a pin curl, or it could be that they're going to use do a short hairstyle. They can tongue and pin curl that. So the blow dry must include the use of a round brush. So for the colouring, they have colour and light and hair services using 2 products. So it's woven highlights to the roots, or another colouring technique. We say a minimum section of a T-section, and we need to change depth and tone and use another technique. The barbering, the way this looks at, the barbering must use a minimum of 9 techniques for the cut. 2 barbering looks using 9 techniques, 2 neck shapes, 2 outline shapes, 1 finished look on men's hair and 1 drying technique. On the shaving now, there's 2 facial cuts, 1 full beard and moustache, and a partial beard and moustache, and a full shave.
So, Sarah, before we joined this webinar, you were telling me lovely, wonderful tips for everybody, but what are the critical 4 top tips that you would recommend the guys on the webinar today take away with them and implement with their apprentices?
Well, for me, the first one is read the assessment plan and appendix. You're all hairdressers, you all know the on-programme qualification, you're all experts at that. What we need to be looking at is the assessment plan and the appendix. That is, for me, the key to starting out a successful EPA journey. I think you need to make sure that you read the plan and highlight key areas that you're going to be assessing that the apprentice is going to be assessed on. And once you've read it throughout, check your understanding of what you need to achieve with your learner and the models, and this will help you choose help the learner choose the correct model for that endpoint assessment.
And then you've told me so much, and I'm not a hair specialist at all, about the models and the requirements. So can you just give everybody a bit of a recap? How many models? Who can be a model, for instance? Can it be me mum? Can it be one of my work colleagues? And how many do we need? What do I need to know about models?
Okay, here we go. Well, models can be anybody. It could be your mum, your nana, your brother, your sister, your auntie, your uncle. You can also now use a colleague. So a colleague can actually, from your salon, can be your model, which is absolutely super. But I must stress that if an apprentice uses a colleague as a model, that is super. But the model needs to say absolutely nothing to that apprentice. So there's no colluding going on, because obviously that endpoint assessment would be stopped by the LEPA if they were caught, sort of prompting the apprentice. So just be very, very careful on that. So the task requires working on models. We know that live models are not easy. But what we need to be looking at here, for me, it's choosing the right model for the endpoint assessment. It's like an artist. They need a blank canvas to be able to create something wonderful. So our hairdressers and barbers need probably a good head to just to work with, and that's going to meet the requirements that they want to have done for the endpoint assessment. So they're going to have to research models that are going to give them the best opportunity to showcase all their skills. When working with models, I think we need to brief the models so they're aware of what is expected of them, because some models just think they can just rock up and they're just being a model, but they need to know that it's really important for this apprentice that they come on the time and date they say they're going to turn up, and they're going to have the services that they've already said they would on that day. So it is good to brief the models for the expectations. Again, ensuring the complete familiarity of the assessment plan. That is really, really important with the model. So it's making sure you take the appendix and cross-reference it to the model's hair. Can you achieve what you need to achieve? Making sure you are sticking to that assessment plan and appendix. Review and check all aspects of the range is covered constantly. That's a big thing. We don't want somebody not using a product on a model, because that could be detrimental. So what I would say is sense check models. I'm saying to apprentices and to yourselves, let's all sense check the models, making sure that the learner has got the best model for this endpoint assessment. Make sure that they carry out all the necessary tests that they're required to do prior to their endpoint assessment. And the big thing is don't let them try something new on the day that they haven't already perfected. I think it's really important that they have the plan, they have the schedule, they have the plan, they know what they're going to do. It's a good point here to raise where apprentices can also use a mood board to show their planning of this endpoint assessment. This wouldn't be marked by the endpoint assessor, but it does show good planning, and it does help the apprentice on the day of their endpoint assessment. Tip 3, commercial. We need commercial timings throughout this endpoint assessment. It's a 6-hour for a hairdressing assessment or a 3-hour for barbering. So timings are crucial, and commercial timings is what we should be talking about to our apprentices throughout their on-programme, and getting them to actually work a column to keep in time before they actually do their endpoint assessment. So I think several mock tests are important to familiarise the endpoint assessment format and get used to the apprentice coping with maybe any possible mistakes or pressures that they are going to, or they're feeling. As we said, it's a timed observation, so we've got to think about this when they're doing the mocks. Did they carry out all their tasks and services in the most logical order, or or could they have done something better there? Were they fully prepared before starting their endpoint assessment? Did they have everything they needed? Did they have all their products ready? Did they have the tools and equipment ready? So it's making sure that everything they've got is in front of them, so they're not wasting any time. So, but once the apprentice has practiced the assessment, they need to really write down what went well, what could they have done better, and what they would do differently next time. Tip 4 is now this preparation for this practical test. So what I would say and advise is, when preparing, is to write a list of questions that you think you'll be asked by the endpoint assessor. It's a bit like a story. I think if I was an EPA, I would probably say something like, can you talk me through your consultation? So it's like a story. Can you talk me through your consultation? They will ask you some questions, but you know that client, you know the model, you know exactly what you've done on their hair, so it should be just like telling a story to that endpoint assessor. There are some important details you need to know prior to arriving for the practical test, so I'll make sure you're prepared to give a star performance. So they need to know exactly where they're going for their endpoint assessment. They're going to need to know if they're going to be in longer than 6 hours, which they are. 6 hours is just the actual test itself. What do they need to take with them? Again, we're looking at these reliable models that won't let them down on the day, that meet the requirements for the endpoint assessment, and that they have got all their tools, products and equipment for the day.
Fantastic, thanks Sarah. So in terms of preparing for the actual hair EPA, what do we all need to know on this webinar today?
Well, we're looking at some of the areas for development that are still out there. Is customer service. I mean, customer service, as you can see, if you pass, you get 25 marks. If you fail, if you get a distinct, you get 35 marks. But customer service, what we're seeing at the moment, people apprentices gave aftercare advice, but it's very limited to just products, rather than telling them about the product, but not how to use the product or how to manage the hair at home, or when they should book in the next service, which is really, really important. So a consultation and selling, if you like, are built in throughout the whole of that endpoint assessment. So if we look at the finishing style hair, so again, looking at the looks that are created here, in some cases, we said the blow dry didn't create volume and movement. We said that a round brush needs to be used to create that definite curl and movement and volume, because that can't be achieved by wands or tongs. But if you don't have to just do a long hair curly blow dry. It seems to be at the moment everybody's doing a long hair curly blow dry. They're doing leaving the brushes in, or they're pin curling it up to get the set, and then they're doing these probably up styles that are probably too outrageous or a bit messy. Maybe they need something simpler. They're making it quite difficult for themselves with this hair up. We don't want a messy bun. We want polish and bun. We want a finish and polish. But I do feel that they need to be looking at a simpler way of getting, putting the hair up, and actually thinking about, they don't just have to do a curly blow dry on long hair. You can do a curly blow dry on short hair, as you can see from the two pictures on this slide. So again, apprentices, when they were cutting the hair, they were basically not sense checking the models, because we've had a lot of cases where two models have turned up and they've both got below the shoulder hair, and they're both keeping the hair below the shoulders. It's fine if you've got two models that have got long hair, if one's having the hair cut above the shoulders. So I think we need to be be mindful with this. Again, apprentices, they need to remember to check their balance and finish, so they've personalised the look, and they need to start giving more attention to detail. This is where they could gain distinction marks, but they're not. So we're looking for that personalised, finished look with a little bit of finesse. And also, thinking about this, some apprentices found it really difficult to focus on the day. So I think really by getting them to do the mock endpoint assessments with a column, keeping to times, will really help them to stay focused, so they'll be able to meet that required standard. Now, I just want to clarify on bleach, because we're seeing a lot of apprentices at the moment just using bleach for the highlights, but bleach doesn't have to be used. As long as the colour used changes depth and tone, and another technique is being used, that's fine. The other techniques, such as a quasi in between the foils to refresh colour, or a balayage, and 2 different colouring products are used. We are stating here as well, please make sure that your apprentice always refers to the manufacturer's instructions. So we'll go into the T section as well. The T section is a woven technique that highlights the hair from the top and the sides of the head, and the hair is woven to the roots. So you can use your easy mesh here as well. The curly blow dry, I just want to reiterate on the curly blow dry, please make sure that you actually are making a definite curl, and try to find models that are not too difficult, so you're not losing too much time on that long hair.
Brilliant. So we just have one question, Sarah, that I think is relevant just to ask now. Do the 2 colour techniques have to be done on the 2 separate models?
No, they can be done on the same model. And we're actually finding, in the beginning, it was discussed that it was 2 separate models, but we had it confirmed last year, and I did send an email out to say that the colouring techniques can be done on 1 model, which does save time.
Wonderful. So one model for the 1 cut, and the other model could be done with just both colour techniques.
Yeah, so you could have a colour, a creative cut and blow dry. You could have a blow dry with a brush, pin it up, and then comb that out as a blow dry in a set, or put it up in a nice up style. So it really is a planning of this and looking at the assessment plan and the appendix and the model's hair. They've got the right head of hair for the style that they're looking for.
Lovely. And really importantly, one of them could be my mum, and one of them could be my work colleague, as long as one has got under the shoulder length, and one is below the shoulder length.
One's below the shoulder and one's above the shoulder.
Lovely. So we've shared some top tips from all of the assessing we've done on hair so far. So we're going to now move on to barbering. So anything that we've learned through the EPA assessments we've been completing, so we can give some top tips on barbering. Let me just get that slide up. There we go.
So yeah, barbering. Again, as I'm saying to everybody now, please refer to the assessment plan and Appendix B. Styling and finishing. When styling and finishing men's hair, we had some barbers who didn't use the correct amount of styling products, and unfortunately, because it states in the assessment plan and the appendix that they have to use these products, those apprentices failed their endpoint assessment. So when we say styling products, we're looking at sprays, creams, gels, wax, tonics, oils, and any styling powders. So when cutting facial hair, some apprentices only cut the outside edge of a beard, not very good at blending the internal layers. So again, we're saying, practice those cutting techniques. As I said, only the outside edges that were cut and weren't blended. When completed the beard trim, the apprentice must fully demonstrate their capabilities. The beard cut must be completed in every aspect and include trimming of the moustache and defining the outline shape and general reduction of the beard bulk. Also, apprentices must wear gloves when they are using an open cutthroat razor. That is just one thing we need to get across there. So oral questions, again, as you saw on the previous grading slide, understanding is weighted really heavy, 100 marks for a pass, 140 for a distinction. What we have found with understanding in these oral questions is that some apprentices were really unsure about hair classifications, influencing factors, different types of tests that they have to carry out on the hair. So again, please try and get a bank of questions together for your apprentices so that they can be working through them, because oral question does weigh a big part of this endpoint assessment.
Okay, so a question on that. How many products was it? You mentioned that they must use.
Well, they're all different, you see. For in Appendix A for hairdressing and Appendix B for barbering, it would tell you differently for the different units. So that's why the apprentice and the provider and employer needs to know exactly what's on the appendix. They need to cross-reference that to their which brings me nicely into their appointment schedule. So what we're talking about with what Charlie and I were talking about then was the appendix in the assessment plan, because this is basically all that we're at now. We've finished the on-programme. We just have an appendix there that the IEPA is going to look at and check that you have matched everything from that appendix. So it would be here that I would have my apprentice planning the day and using the appendix to make sure that they have ticked off everything that they need to do for that endpoint assessment. The EPA, the IEPA will request the appointment schedule, or you call them, whatever you call it, prior to the EPA day. It's got to be uploaded to the EPA portal, and this shows the IEPA that the apprentice has planned for the services on that day. They may change because of circumstances, but as the planning's already there, and the IEPA then will be able to, talk to the apprentice about that. So you'll see the example here. We've got a description of times, services, products used, and ranges covered. So I do strongly recommend that you refer to the appendix for hairdressing, A for hairdressing, B for barbering, and cross-check this with the apprentice so they meet the full criteria as stated in that assessment plan.
So this is what's classified as your EPA assessment evidence. So when I was talking earlier that you need to upload your mandatory evidence at the gateway, that was just your maths, your English and your units that are confirmed. So that just goes onto the EPA portal at the start to get you your dates. Once your EPA date's confirmed, you then have a 10-day countdown before that date, and that's when you need to get this evidence uploaded into the EPA portal. So you don't need to have this ready when you're actually booking your EPA date, but you must have this ready 10 working days before your actual confirmed EPA assessment date, and then you pop this and upload this into the EPA portal. So just to move on, your final advice.
Oh, my final advice for the employers, providers and apprentices. So my final advice really is that employer and provider need to make sure that the apprentice chooses a model as well. This is going to be the biggest thing for me, is choosing the model that is the correct model that's going to get that apprentice, that pass that distinction. They can showcase the skills, and that's a big thing for me. Again, checking not just the apprentice, the employer and the provider, checking that the models are suitable and they meet the brief and the appendix A or B. I think that's really, really important there. Also, again, we have our LEPA reports. We have 2 LEPA reports a year, so they're really, really interesting, and I would suggest you read through them. I mean, they're on our website. I'll put a link to the landing page here. Any of the learners can get, any of the apprentices can get these off our website. So maybe have a read through them, through this with them, and let them know. The frequently asked questions, well, I think they're absolutely amazing. Our lead input assessors put these together. They've just put in a new batch together that should be out either at the end of this week or next week. Again, these are absolutely brilliant. If I was teaching, I would be making these, I'd be laminating these on A3, cutting them up and making a good starter and end game in my sessions, because this would make them familiarise themselves with that assessment plan too. Well, I've got nothing else to talk to you about yet. Now, sorry, I'm all talked out. I'm very dry. I hope you enjoyed the presentation from myself and Charlie. Charlie, is there anything you'd like to say?
We do have a couple of questions. I'm just going to go and recap and ask those questions. So let Sarah grab a bit of water, because we had a couple more questions around that styling and the assessment. So just to go back, I'm just going to make sure that we cover everybody's that they've popped on. And again, you've just got another 10 minutes now, everybody. So if you've got any other questions that you want to ask either myself in terms of the process for getting your EPA dates, or Sarah, just pop them on and we'll try and run through as many as we can before we complete the webinar session today on time for you. So we had the first question, which was about, can we use, does the colour need to be done on the two separate models or not? And you kindly confirmed that actually both of the different colouring techniques could be done on the same model. It didn't need to be over the two models.
That's right.
We've had a question from Leanne who says, must the whole head change depth and tone?
Not the whole head, no, but it depends what colour, what you're actually planning to do.
And do both of the colours need to change depth and tone?
Do both of the colours need to change depth and tone? Well, you'll be changing with your light. If you're highlighting, you'll be changing, and then you'll be toning, so that'll be changing the depth and tone. Yeah.
So that's a yes. Is it one or two styling assessments, which has come from Sarah?
One or two styling. Well, they'll be doing the blow dry and the set. So they'll be blow drying the hair. They can either pin this in pin curls all over, let it cool, and then dress it out. Or they can, and then on the style and finish, they do the cut with maybe a creative cut. They will just do the creative cut.
Okay, there's one for me. So I'm going to go on to this one. So I've said that there was 4 signatures required on the Gateway Declaration. There's the 3 signatures, just to confirm. So that's the signature of the apprentice, the signature of the employer, and the signature of the provider. So apologies if I said 4. I obviously can't count first thing on the Monday, but it's just the 3 signatories that are required on the declaration form.
And I just want to go back and clarify, it's definitely 2 styling assessments.
We've got a question about the moustache. So it says, when it says moustache, does it mean part of the beard or as a separate style? And I'm guessing this is for barbering, with me not being an expert.
For the moustache. Right, so what it's asking for the moustache, isn't it? So it's saying that they have to basically blend their beard, the moustache. So it's not separate. It's maybe part of the beard, or it could be separate. I mean, it depends on the model that you've got.
So what we'll do is we'll confirm that to get greater clarity around that question, Roxy, and take that away. So we'll add the additional clarification.
So it's one full beard and moustache, and it's a partial beard and moustache. I hope that helps.
Wonderful. And again, we'll answer these into the Q&A session. I'm just going to have to recap through now. I'm just going to see if there's any other questions that are coming through. Just bear with us. Leanne, we haven't spoken about the level 3 standard. We are just keeping this to your level 2, the hair pathway A and barbering B in the actual hair standard at this stage. I'm sure we will be putting on further updates about that level 3 in due course. So this is just sticking to the level 2.
The Hair and Beauty newsletter will be out next, the end of this week or beginning of next week. There's a lot of information on there about the level 3 advanced creative. So it's all exciting, guys. It's looking really good. We're really happy about it.
Wonderful. We've been asked, Sarah, another one, can electrical equipment be used with the styling, i.e. straighteners? That's come from Carol, so thank you, Carol.
Carol, I mean, it's straighteners. I'd like them to blow dry the hair straight, not use straighteners. Again, it would depend on style, what they were using them for.
Could they finish though with the straighteners after they've blowed
I wouldn't
straight?
like, because what we can go into a debate here. They normally blow dry the hair off and then use straighteners to make it straight. We would like to see them use a brush to blow dry it straight.
And is that in the assessment plan, the brush in the assessment plan?
It's in the assessment plan.
So, Carol, just to confirm, the assessment plan states that they are looking for a straightening with a brush, not with the straighteners. That would be an additional finish on top, but they would have to actually straighten it with the brush. Just, I hope that helps. Deborah's asked, is the EPA portal located? Is it on Walled Garden? It's not, Deborah. The EPA portal is a separate system. If you're new to us and you're just making your first booking, you will book through Walled Garden and then you will be emailed the login to the portal and you'll get set up onto the EPA portal. If you've already used us for an EPA, you'll be given the EPA portal login at the very start, and your additional apprentices will just be added to that portal. So the same login then sticks with you for the rest. You don't get like a new login every time for every apprentice. There's one login set up once for you for your whole organisation, and all your apprentices will be just put into that EPA portal. Again, the guidance documents that are on that, the 8-step guide at the very first slide, if you click onto that link and if you click into the stages, stage 3 and stage 5, it does give you a little bit more detail about that EPA portal in the stage 5 element of the guides. We are running out of time, so I'm just going to quickly put on pause just to see whether we've missed any final questions. So just bear with us 2 seconds. We'll just do one final wrap up of a couple of questions that are through. Any that we can't answer, though, we will follow up in a Q&As afterwards. So just bear with us 2 seconds. Okay, so we've got quite a few different questions. So if we don't answer your question today, they will be followed up on a Q&A. So we've been asked a question about what's acceptable 20% off the job evidence. If you need to be signing the declaration to say that obviously you've given your apprentice the off the job and that you've followed the funding requirements for an apprentice. You don't evidence to us as your EPAO your off the job or your 20% off the job, because that's a funding requirement. So you will need to keep that evidence in store for when you're audited for your funding. But for us as an EPAO, you are signing the declaration to say that you have met your 20%, but there's no evidence that you need to share with us as your EPAO. But naturally, you'll be able to, you have to audit it for when you're, and evidence it for when you're actually audited, because you're obviously drawing down public money. So I hope that answers that question. And then I will take one further question about, and this is about the curly broad dry. So can the curly broad dry be achieved by blow dry and pin curling? Does that cover the set and blow?
Yes, so you can blow dry your client, the model's hair. You can either leave the brushes in to cool down, or you can take the brushes out and pin curl it to cool, dress that out, and then you can then so you're going to get your blow dry there and your set. So yes, it's a 2-in-1.
And a real quick one I've just spotted. Are gloves needed when they're shampooing or not?
No.
That was a nice and easy one. The rest of the questions on there, they're all wonderful. So thank you very much for putting them on. We are running out of time now, and I'm sure that you've all got much more important things to do than listen to myself and Sarah for the rest of your day. So what we'll do is we're going to finish the webinar now. We will follow up in the next week with the presentation out to everybody that's attended, the recording of the webinar, and we'll answer any of the full set of all of the questions that everybody's asked with the answers, and they'll be shared with you. Sarah?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you guys, but also to let you know when the newsletter comes out next week, we have got a list of events that we'll be doing around the country. So they're all on Eventbrite, they're in the newsletter, so book on them. It's curriculum planning. We've also got Meet the EPA team. So we've got quite a lot on there. So if you go follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn, you'll see everything. But if you want to go on Eventbrite, City and Girls Hair and Beauty, then you can sign up for any of our events. Thanks, and I hope you all have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening. I hope you found it useful. Bye.